Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of MartechBrain, where we talk to the best digital leaders and marketers, and we go deep into one topic. My guest today is Pradeep Nidamarthi, VP and Head Digital at SBI Mutual Fund. So while Pradeep works in a financial services firm, his background is very deep on the digital services and digital space. So we're going to talk to him about the digital experiences of customers and how things have changed, especially in the post-COVID world. We'll try and also cover that. Welcome to MartechBrain, Pradeep.
Thanks a lot for having me. Great to be here.
Thank you. So Pradeep, let's begin by understanding or defining really the user experience and marketing in the digital world, the way you see it. So it's good for people to understand the mental models and from how you see the world.
I think this has been some time in the making. If you look at the marketing funnel as well, from discovery to the actual purchase, I think it has changed a lot more in the last few years with the proliferation of social channels, and other digital channels as such. But almost anything you buy today, I think the marketing funnel is surely touched by one digital channel or other, and a big part of the decision is made online. Especially true for urban and tier 1 and tier 2 cities. Tier 3 cities, probably not as much, but then again, even there, you can almost bet that more than 50% of the time, some part of the journey is surely touched by digital channels, right? So that's one part of, so when you're defining marketing, be it the overall funnel that you're talking about, attribution, or even about the experience that the customer has, I think one needs to consider that, there was going to be intervention of a digital channel somewhere, and we need to understand the extent to which that is there. And then only successfully you can actually say that, okay, when I'm considering a customer, this is how I'm going to sort of, influence that particular person to be part of my world, right? So that's the marketing definition, I would say. And when we're talking about customer experience, I think, especially in the digital world, right? A lot of people confuse or think that user experience, on the digital asset is actually customer experience. But that's like a typical iceberg approach, right? In the sense that, for example, if you take somebody, one of the organizations that I worked for, if you take Amazon, yes, Amazon has got a fantastic site which is available. They do think very deeply about, how to sort of cater to different people and the journey and the data recommendations, all those things. But I think where Amazon wins is when they say they are going to get something to you tomorrow, they follow upon that promise, right? So customer experience is not just purely user experience on your digital asset. It is the sum total of the experience on the asset, the using data, the level to which you know your customer and can really enhance his experience on the site or on the digital asset, and most importantly, post-purchase, right? As well, how are you going to follow up on your, overall promise and bring him back to the purchase cycle, right? So user experience is all these, and one way or the other, digital channels and data. For me, actually, data is digital, digital is data, right? At the end of the day, if there's one differentiating factor that you would have as a marketer or as a digital business, somebody who heads the digital business, it is the data that you have, because everything else is pretty much a level playing field. Everybody else has it, right? So that's how you define marketing, and that's how you define user experience, and then take it from there.
Yeah, so if I just sort of summarize what you're saying, essentially, what is very important as a marketer is to understand where digital sort of fits in for that particular company or that industry in the customer's sort of funnel, in the funnel. And therefore, that is where the interventions need to be done. There is a role for digital, of course, today in pretty much every vertical, but the extent of the digital intervention differs from industry to industry.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the second important point that you said is that, I think the Amazon point, I think, is very important, is that from a customer's experience, from what the customer basically sees is that he or she just looks at digital as one part, but for the customer, it's the full end-to-end that matters. Okay, so I may have the best website, but if my delivery is not on time, then that experience is not good. Okay.
Yeah. See, if you look at it, almost the so-called, in quotes, online businesses, the real fulfillment of that, except for, let's say, social marketing or, for the Facebooks of the world and probably Google search part of the world, uh, every other so-called online business, the fulfillment actually happens in the real world. So unless you have taken care of that as well with the same care that you would do online, the whole experience and journey is not complete, right? That we should be very much be aware of, whenever we are promising something to the customer.
Yeah, so it almost becomes like otherwise tunnel vision, where you're focused on trying to super optimize one part, but leaving aside many of the other dimensions which make up the full experience.
Absolutely.
So while I think this is an important point again, where there is a digital component to a user experience, but what we need to look at is the entire experience. How has the marketing funnel changed in your mind through the years? I mean, you've seen the evolution of digital for many years now. So if there were 2 or 3 key trends that you can sort of highlight, I think you can either look at financial services or any other industry. How is the marketing funnel sort of evolved through the years? And also, I think we can talk about how attribution is changing, both of these things.
Right. So if you look at how marketing funnel has changed, I think a big part is about discovery. General, discovery in non-digital world used to be through your traditional media. If you look at it, a customer, you needed some content or something like a TV or television or radio or something wherein the customer is actually using it, and you actually do a mass market spray and pray, right? You say that, okay, I have got this bulk customer that I want, and this is how I'm going to sort of address them, right? So discovery used to happen that way, and that still works for many bulge market, bulge bracket players. But I think now we have the opportunity to make discovery much more pointed to people who are actually looking for that particular product. And not only about the product, the most important thing is there's opportunity to sort of present your services or product to the customer when they are looking for it, right? There is an aspect of them looking for the product and the timing aspect, right? Which was not possible earlier, right? So that way, even the discovery part of it cannot only be made to the pertinent person, but at the pertinent time as well. So that's one particular thing that has changed, right? And significantly changed. Second thing I think that has changed with respect to marketing in general is that even the smaller players have got that huge opportunity to disrupt some of the bigger players, right? Means, who would have thought that FMCG world could sort of be that one could compete with Gillettes of the world. But then again, you have players like the Man Company and others who really picked up or focused on one thing, do a good job on the product side, and can really go after established players and market segments that they could really influence and make a name for themselves, which is not conceivable in the pre-digital world, in the sense that somebody has created that huge headway and it's very tough to sort of catch up, right? That's, I think, the second thing that especially established players like us need to be very much aware of, that there will be marginal players who will sort of chip away at something that you are good at and keep on doing that, and you suddenly realize that they have become a competitor to you, right? So that's the second thing I think that has changed. And the third thing I think that has really changed, I think, is data, and the amount of data customer as a customer that I put out there is sometimes scary, and what people can make out of that data is something that has changed, and how we handle data in this overall ecosystem, both as a customer and also as a an organization which uses the data to provide better offerings to the customer. I think these are three fundamental things that have changed, and I think that's something that we'll grapple with over the next for the foreseeable future. Sure.
Yeah. So essentially, I think the if I dig a little bit more into the second part that you said, the rise of smaller companies to be able to take on
Yeah.
some of the larger ones. A very interesting point, because I think two things are happening in that space. One is, of course, the equalizing effect of technology. And the second thing in India in the last few years that we have seen is the large availability of venture capital, which has essentially
Yeah.
fueled the dreams and the ability of startups and newer companies to take on established players. So it's almost like for the last 20, 30 years, there was not that much change. And suddenly you now see existing business models getting upended. And you talked about in the men's grooming space. And we have seen that in space after space now, the newer entrants who are just cutting across, or who are bypassing traditional channels and going direct to customer are really having a big impact. So now if we look at attribution, now I think the customer is basically coming in at different elements in the journey. Now, how do you as a marketer think about attribution? So how do you decide what is the role which channel has to play in this journey? What got me the final sale? And therefore, where do I make my next investments?
That's $1 million question, right? See, always, even before the digital world happened, I think um, there's always this tussle between how much do I spend on brand versus how much do I spend on performance, right? Even traditional channels, right? Saying that, okay, I want to put my name out there and build customer awareness, and how much I do put into my channels, which are direct to market channels that reach out to the customer, right? Same is now the case in the digital world as well. Now, attribution has changed, become much more tougher because of the 3, 4 channels that the customer interacts with you before he makes the purchase. He jumps across spaces, he jumps across devices, digital to analog to digital, and again to digital, and maybe the final sale happens on the analog side of things. So I think rule of thumb for me, I think, is, across the spaces that I've worked in, to some extent, we should let go of the whole attribution thing to some extent and just say, last touch is what I will look at. And then assume that at least 1/3 of your channels are digital channels, even though it looks like that or not. That's one. Second thing that probably we need to do is, even on the branding side of things, some of the metrics that we use are like impressions, and some other number of impressions is the typical metric that you use for your branding side of things. But probably one needs to go a little bit deeper than that and say that, along with impressions, I will also look at the quality of those impressions and develop certain metrics which will define that for you. And then, thereby, monitor what's the kind of spend that you are doing on the brand side of things, which you need to do any which is. I'm not against that. Mm-hmm. But I think that needs to be much more tighter, and say that I will put much more premium on whatever spends I'm doing on the brand side of things. things and measure it much more closely. And I think to a large extent, performance uh, side of things needs to be driven much more by data, right? Because right now, a lot of the things uh, that are done on the performance side as well could be optimized a lot more, which doesn't happen. And in most organizations, it doesn't happen. Right? So I think, yeah, so have much better grip on what you are spending on the brand side of things, and performance marketing much more driven by data is what we need to do to figure out attribution.
Now, one thing you've talked quite a bit about data, and I think one thing is there that there's a lot of data available now with businesses, with brands, which at every touch point, really, in a way, the customer is giving so much of information. Now it's up to the brand to basically decide how that information is used. And in various conversations I've had in the last few months with marketers, I think there's still huge gaps, which I see. Really, that the data is there. It should really be used. It should be captured. First of all, it starts actually with the capture, just capturing data at every touch point, then the analytics. Now, you've seen multiple businesses. What do you think are the bottlenecks today? In theory, everyone knows it's a data world. We all talk about it. We use it all the time. But what are the bottlenecks when it comes to an operating perspective? Where do businesses falter when it comes to the usage of data?
So the thing is, great point, right? Means you are absolutely right. First of all, when you look at usage of data, people say that they have organizations, businesses say they have a lot of data. But most of the times when you really look under the hood, you will realize that it is mostly transactional data, right? So in the sense that the customer has come in, and if you look at even some of the biggest businesses in India, they would say, hey, we have around 1 million customers, and they have data regarding them. What they actually mean is they have transaction data regarding those 1 million customers. Now that is post facto, right? What you need to really make sure that you make effective use of data is, like we spoke right in the starting, you need to pitch your product or service to the customer at the right time as well, wherein the customer is actually looking for it, right? So first of all, that's one. So people have only transactional data. Even that is not used to the maximum extent that, so that you can bring the customer back into the repurchase cycle. Very few people have the behavioral data, and also the customer mapping is not done, right? So what happens is, only about your own customers. You don't know about people. How do I market to somebody who has come in, hasn't left any details with me? Is there a way to do it? There are ways of doing it, but then again, a lot of people don't know how to do that, or they don't have the infrastructure to do that. Second thing is, so there is unknown, there is a lead, there is a interested prospect, and then there is your registered user, then there is your customer, and then there is repurchase, right? So there is this huge journey that and then we have data only from probably registered user till purchase.
Right.
And there's a huge, part of the funnel that is right in before that, which, we don't know how to effectively market to, use, do that mapping. So I think that's where most of the organizations falter, in the sense that from unknown to a customer, they are not able to map their users, and they are not able to sort of, market to them or reach out to them at the right time. There are tools for it. There is the whole marketing automation stack for it, and there are a bunch of players who can do that. but it's garbage in, garbage out. If you cannot yourself map those users and have the infrastructure to capture that data and the tools to act across channels, you'll not be able to do it.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, because without, I mean, we talk a lot, when we talk data, naturally we also talk about AI and machine learning. But if your data is not there or is not high quality, okay, none of the other models are going to work. And
they're not.
And also, I think, Pradeep, this point that the differentiation, I think that you can now do across businesses. You talked earlier that, see, the basic products are very similar across businesses in a specific industry. The differentiation really comes in a way through the use and application of technology in some ways. That's becoming now very clear because the customer is basically becoming much more digitally savvy. And we have the big transformation in the last 3-4 years in India. Now, if we just dig a little deeper on this particular point, that in the first part of the journey, if there is one or two things you could advise businesses on what they should be doing better from this unknown stage to the customer stage, what are two things which businesses can basically do sort of tomorrow morning to start collecting the data right, start mapping customers better?
That's a great question, right? One thing is, first of all, collect data. Means people think that they do. Get your, means on the brass tacks, means, operationally. Please define your funnel and be very sure of what kind of data do you want, right? Because the general metrics that everybody talks about or Google gives you, those are pretty much commonplace, right? Everybody has it. But then again, you don't have it. First of all, one doesn't, define the funnel as to, what is it that you exactly want to, capture. Is it the device level data? Is it the interaction level data? What does that mean? That's one. And second thing is, do map your users, right? In the sense that if there is, and then that user mapping needs to be there, and none of the digital marketing stacks that you have will work. Because people talk things, right? Oh, we have a DMP, we will do this, we will do that. But unless your user is mapped, unless you know that, Rajesh had come 10 days back, he was an unknown user. He registered with me, but then again, now 5 days down the line, he is using a different device. So your cookie ID becomes different. And till you log in, I don't know it's Rajesh again. What people don't end up doing is once you log in again using that other device, you need to, go circle backwards and say, okay, all these two cookies are actually Rajesh, so that you have much more context right now, right? And that's a very tedious, tough task to do. But then again, map your users, and keep that a running thing that you do day in, day out, and really know what is the data that you want to capture, right? And what is the, end goal that you want to sort of achieve, right? So these two things, I think, needs to be done. It's painstaking. It will take some time to do. But then again, you first of all need to do that before you start spending money on the other things, because all those things will not work, or at least they will work only in bits and pieces if you don't get this whole thing right.
I think very good advice. Basically, just start with data collection. At every touch point, are you collecting it right? Are you collecting the data that you really will need later on for the other purposes that you have? And second is the ability to map customers. I think without this, you'll just end up with a lot of records and not get the benefit out of that.
And you actually end up doing the other way around, right? Means it's the same customer.
Correct.
See, one of the most common gripe that customers have is, why are you calling me? I already bought your service. Or I bought that product. I bought yesterday. I bought your credit card yesterday. Why are you calling me again? That's because, that customer probably interacted with you using a different device, and you tagged him as an unknown user, and your whole marketing effort is going into it. You have a pissed off customer and you are spending money on it, right? So yeah, that's a very typical example of, where you are already spending so much money and getting an irate customer who's already done the job for you that you wanted.
Which is a great point you just said, and I think it would be good to dig a little deeper, delve a little deeper into that. Is the fact that today's customer is omni-channel.
Yeah.
It's now not as simple as it was like a few years ago. Today they are interacting through could even now be WhatsApp as a channel. Many businesses now have set up WhatsApp. So all of this is happening. I think the job of the marketer or the digital head leader is actually much more complex now, because you got to not just map on the same channel, you also need to connect that customer across multiple channels.
Yeah. So this is the standing joke that I have with my team. Probably 10, 15 years back, you used to reach out to, you used to spray across, some thousand people, and hope something happens. So that was the problem then. Nowadays the problem is, the exact 100 people that you want to reach out to, but you reach out to them multiple times. So you are doing the same mistake in a different way.
Absolutely.
So let's say you had 1,000 arrows to play with 15 years back, and you used them on a random bunch. Now what you are doing is you're using the same 1,000 arrows, but on 100 people and hitting them 10 times each, which really is not the intended improvement that you wanted, right? So that happens a lot in today's world.
Yeah, I think it's so really, I think when we talk of digital, what's very clear is that this is a whole new world. I think, and just setting up a digital team, etc., is, I think, just a starting point in a journey. Okay, there are no magic solutions. It's hard work, digging through the data, mapping customers, and then avoiding the pitfalls that you just spoke about. I think.
Yeah, see, digital is two things, right? One of the big difference between if somebody is making the transition from traditional marketing to today's time, I think one big thing that they need to realize is, because you have lots of great marketing leaders who have made the transition very seamlessly to the digital world, and some people haven't. When I've spoken to them, interacted with them, one thing I realized is one big thing that people who have made the transition is traditional marketing was about that one big idea, one big ad that will influence 1,000 people or a million people, right? You talked about that one TV ad at Super Bowl, which was talked about. But digital marketing is not like that. It's sort of, death by 1,000 cuts, or maybe that's the wrong sentence to use. It's more about conversion through 1,000 ways, right? You try something, it doesn't work, you tweak it a little bit, you try again, you again tweak it a little bit, and you try again, right? So you need to be persistent, you need to be changing and doing a lot of things and getting, inch by inch rather than that one grand gesture that you make. So that's the difference between the traditional marketing and digital marketing today.
I think
or marketing in today's world.
Beautifully put. I think it's really getting to work every day. How do you do that 1% better in a way?
Absolutely.
It's not just I can just get this one grand idea and execute, and everyone sees it and they all buy my product. It's not that. And in a way,
there's a place for it, but not most of the times.
And in a way, I think the differentiation between companies also can be significant now. So the sources of advantage, competitive advantage, which were there in the pre-digital world, I think are going to be very different in the post-digital world. And especially the changes that we have seen in India. And sort of my one final question is, you've been in the space for the last many years, and the last year everyone talks about as being sort of disruptive in many different ways. The adoption of digital, the changes which we are seeing. If there are one or two big takeaways that you have, which are sort of trends which are getting accelerated, I think any key things which stand out for you in the transformation that we are seeing, either on the customer side or on the marketer side?
I usually I do get asked this question a lot, but I think I tend to disappoint people on this because I think, yes, there has been more adoption and people were, sort of forced to make that transition much quicker than otherwise they would have. But I don't think a whole lot of things have changed on the ground in terms of, how one should look at it, right? In the sense that, because those trends were there even before this whole thing happened, right? I would rather say, what we need to be very careful about, marketers need to be careful about, during this COVID world and post the COVID world is, I think one thing is, lead with a lot more empathy and, we sometimes forget that being in the digital world, everything being measured and all these things, we lose sight of empathy and, people who built that into their solutions will always, going forward as well, will sort of, means it could be empathy towards the customer saying that, hey, take financial services themselves, means they need to redeem the money and they need tomorrow. And for whatever reasons, because the systems are not built or they don't have the digital literacy or the things that are needed for you to help them, you are not able to give them their money tomorrow, right? But you need to have empathy towards that. That's one. And the second thing that we need to really figure out is that there are certain trends which look very important, or certain things, and that depends again on the individual business. There are certain things which look very important right now, but they can fizzle out like that, just like that. Once that whole, pandemic thing sort of, so let's say, we get back to the normal whenever we get to it, hopefully soon. So that's one. So it's very important to understand what will stay the course, what will not, and really put that, the money behind that. Because believe me, as the digital, person who owns the digital business, you can now push people and get away with certain things, getting some expensive toys. But believe me, 18 months down the line, the CFO is coming and asking you, how good, bad, or ugly this was. And you should not, squander this opportunity by asking for frivolous things, which make you look good at that point of time, but will prove very counter to your agenda 18 months down the line. So please be aware of what is that is going to stay, what is temporary, what is the long-term thing, what changes are made. I think that's one thing that we need to look at, advice I would give to people. And if there's one trend in general, I think I would say, learning means, which was, while it was online to earlier, even people whom earlier you think couldn't, put in front of a screen for about an hour and teach them. For example, for us, distribution, right? Distribution is were those people whom we didn't know how to sort of reach out to them teach them certain things and make them a distributor. It's a long process in the mutual fund industry, right? So, but now I think it's in the realm of possibility in the sense that people have understood that the digital side of things is not only for fun and movies. They can use it for actual work as well. Now that I'm speaking to you, I think one trend that has really, I think, come through COVID side of things is, we liked it or not, before COVID, devices, digital side of things were more for fun, not for serious work. But now people know that it can be used for serious work as well. And we need to figure out how that sort of fits in for my own business and customers can go about it. Sorry, it was a long-winded answer.
That's a great overview, I think, for marketers to keep in mind. And just on your point on empathy, a line which I tell in my team to my colleagues is that don't think of ourselves as just being an email company. Okay, there are emotions behind the email. Okay, when we are sending emails, there are emotions which are being sent. When you are sending messages, there are moments, magical moments that are at the end of those messages that are there. So we many times in all this world of data, we tend to forget the emotional part.
Yeah, very much so.
I think that's
very much so. It's
great point.
It's very easy to sort of think of your customer as a user ID or
yeah, absolutely.
ID, that's really not what. I don't think you'll be able to build enduring businesses if we tend to think that way. You might have short-term success, but I think it would take some, that empathy is important more so now.
Absolutely. Great. And excellent pointers. In fact, a lot of good learnings, I think, for anyone who's been watching. We come to the last bit. No, absolutely, Pradeep. I think you've given great insights. I think these are a lot of the basics which sometimes we tend to forget. It's just a reinforcement of fundamental ideas. It's not just about the shiny new thing. It's about doing a lot of things right.
Yeah.
The point that you said.
It's I'm a bit boring that way.
It's a step-by-step journey. I think. I think there's a very good Chinese quote which says a journey of 1,000 miles begins with
one step.
First step, and that's really what you have to think about. We come to our 5 ones at the end. So sort of quick short ones answers. So the one key tech trend or one key technology or trend that excites you.
I think voice, because just like India leapfrogged desktops and directly went to mobile, I think 5 to 10 years down the line, probably we will not have all these apps and everything, and all the interactions will be just voice and any surface that can project, right? So even that could be a death of phones as well, in the sense that you don't need to carry something in your pocket that probably 5 years, 10 years down the line, wherein some technology can just project anything on a surface and you can interact with voice and you're done.
Great point. One tech or trend that has disappointed you?
I really am not. I don't think, I think every technology, has some potential. So I'm not usually disappointed by it. I cannot think of one technology. I just feel anything which hasn't happened, its time hasn't come yet. But then if I think back the last 10 years or whatever, I think that Google Glass thingy was a little bit, I still very, very scary to some extent.
Yeah.
But I really think even that will, in one form or the other, the way that we are giving away our data as a civilization, I think even that's going to be there at some point of time. I hope it doesn't make a comeback, but I wouldn't bet against it.
No, it's a great point. I remember in early 90s, working when I came back from the US, I was working on AI and neural networks. and things were just so slow. You saw do anything, and then suddenly you see 30 years later, it's there everywhere. So you never know how these things come back.
Yeah.
One good book recommendation for people to read?
So recently, means the last two books that I read was The Ride of a Lifetime by Robert Iger.
Disney.
Who had Disney for the last 20 years. And incidentally, just before that, I just read, Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, which is CEO of Nike, the founder of Nike. So both of these books, means this happened to be the most recent books I've read, and they're as good as any. Right. I think one should surely read Phil Knight's book to understand that, people who generally don't fit into description of an executive or a corporate guy could really build something special just because they have the passion for something. As shoes, means who thinks shoes is a sexy thing, but they built it, and Robert Iger's book means it really tells you how to really manage a creative, business and still manage it, as a creative and business as actually shouldn't go together, but he is somebody who has managed that very well. So yeah, both books, great books.
And both about great companies, Disney and Nike.
Great companies, yeah.
One interesting person or podcast which you would recommend that people follow?
I think I always liked right from the time I read his book. Richard Branson is actually somebody that I follow, and I think in a very quirky way. And one should surely read "Losing My Virginity" by Richard Branson. Fantastic book. Means I think I read it some 25 years back, and it still happens to be one of those books I love. So I think he makes some very good pertinent points, which I've always enjoyed, and he seems to strike that right balance between fun, success, seriousness, and everything. So yeah, I think one should a lot to learn from that guy.
Great. And final question: one key driving belief in your life?
Okay, I have heard about I think there's a negative connotation to it as well, but I always look at the positive side of, I might often be wrong, but I'm never indecisive. Mm-hmm. Right? The positive side of things is I've seen too many people, too many organizations, I think people in any sort of leadership position or even a managerial position, I think it's about decisions, right? And almost always there's never a right decision, because if you think about it, you are leading a business and you're surrounded yourself with smart people. If 5 people are coming with you with 10 ideas, obviously all 10 of them are good. Nobody is going to come to you with a stupid idea, right? Because fundamentally they are smart people. Right. So you still have to, at the end of the day, pick up the best among equals. And that could come down to gut, that could come down to data, a mixture of all those things, circumstance. But finally, what people are coming to a person in a leadership position is for a decision, right? So one way or the other, it's better to make quick decisions with what you have and be decisive. Understand if you have made a wrong decision, fail fast and take the corrective action, rather than trying to figure out what's the right decision and keeping everybody in suspense. So yeah.
Fantastic words. I think fantastic advice.
Hope it's helpful for somebody out there.
It was very, very well put. I think many times, we try and wait for that one extra data point to make that call, and time just passes by.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Pradeep. Great conversation.
Thanks for having me.
So friends, that was MartechBrain with Pradeep. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back soon with yet another episode of MartechBrain, the Netcore initiative.